The road of penitence is never-ending. It simply diverges, branches in new ways. Hey everyone, Monarch here, and here we once again find ourselves on this familiar, but oh so unfamiliar road. Defined by the heavier, more grounded feel compared to its contemporaries, the original Blasphemous carved out a name for itself as one of the most exemplary indie Metroidvanias in the current age. Featuring satisfying combat, tight level design, gorgeous pixel art, fantastic lore and world building inspired by Catholic Spanish culture, and the subject of last time, some pretty great bosses. But the journey was not over, for the Game Kitchen had already announced a full-on sequel alongside the Wounds of Eventide DLC, finally showing off the game on April 19th, 2023. So after everything that the original did well, becoming one of my new favorite games of all time, what could this sequel possibly do to improve upon the experience? Simple, really. Just more of everything. The jump between Blasphemous 1 and Blasphemous 2 can be summarized like so, I feel. We may have been dirty, grounded gorillas playing footsies before, but now here we are swinging through the trees like a deranged gibbon of Catholic penance. Metroidvania staples like air dashes and double jumps are finally here in Custodia, and they are certified fresh thanks in part to the overhauled combat and movement system. This allowed for a whole new degree of combat and level design, creating some of the best levels, movement puzzles, and bosses I have ever faced in a Metroidvania. And the latter is exactly what I want to talk about today. Same rules as last time. I'll be considering the design, the challenge, the mechanics, as well as other extraneous factors like the music, storytelling, or inspiration into each of my entries, weighing and comparing each entry to one another as I decide which one I personally enjoy more. Hence, also why this is called a least favorite to favorites video, not a worst to best. It's just my silly little opinion at the end of the day. With all that out of the way, I hope you all have the proper rosary beads on standby, cause this is gonna get bumpy. These are my top 14 Blasphemous 2 bosses, ranked least favorite to favorites. Let's set a baseline for this list. If you were to ask me my honest thoughts on Blasphemous 1 and its boss average, I would say it generally comes across as decent. Most of the bosses are relatively fine and do the job they are assigned for well, but there are a few lows or weird decisions that drag down the quality for me. And in terms of the base game, the 3 exemplary bosses would be Esdras, Kirse, and Chrysanta. This count does go up when you include DLC, but the point of the matter here is that without DLC, the boss average is a bit on the lower end. By contrast, Blasphemous 2, I'd argue, has generally DLC level quality with its bosses even at base, managing to expertly use techniques from the first game's DLC and expand upon them here. The bosses are without a doubt one of the biggest improvements over 1. But when you have an incredibly good boss average, that does also mean the less competent bosses sink right to the bottom. What is worse for a game like this? Being a boss that can be seen as alright, albeit disappointing and nothing noteworthy, or a boss that has tutorial fodder and that's about it? The answer will differ between people, and trust me, we will get to the latter in just a moment. But my god! I cannot describe the disappointment I feel with Sona Formosa Thembra, because the amount of build-up and inspiration this one boss gets is immense. Named after the real-life case of Susona, the character is explained through the backstory of NPC Yerma, who tells us that in an act of Narcissus levels of narcissism, believed their face to be the prettiest in all the realm, and the only one deserving to be reflected in the Lake of the Two Moons, thus inviting the recently awakened Miracle to curse the palace. As a result, everyone there, including Susona, were transformed into monsters, and the Two Moons became trapped into a sort of mirror dimension within the lake. There's also the skull above the shop in the City of the Blessed Name, which is a direct reference to the tale of Susona, and how she requested her head be hung from her house in Seville in repentance for the betrayal against her husband. Husband was plotting a conspiracy against the Spanish Inquisition with several others to get back some measure of Jewish freedom in the Middle Ages. Not sure what the skull here has to do with Susona in game, but hey, cool Spanish lore. So, take a character with as much build-up as the Miracle itself, who has been around since the first game as concept art, is involved with a recurring NPC that can help you in multiple fights, and combine that with one of the coolest areas in the whole game with so much build-up behind it, amazing inspiration with the Persian architecture, a cool as hell gimmick, and then ruin it all with a mediocre as hell boss. I get the idea of her going with Susona here. It's a boss that wants you to play defensive due to the rapid firing of her attacks so you can get your openings. A war of attrition, so to speak. And that's all fine, but something like Serpez at least had the decency to provide some spectacle and mechanical depth to the whole affair. Susona here, though, just does the same thing over and over again, with shooting different arrangements of lightning orbs for most of the fight, while only having two other different attacks in the form of lightning waves that you need to dash through, and a fast-moving laser that spews out from under her head. That's it. For being a boss dripping in so much juicy detail, the game really doesn't use any of that on a mechanical level. There totally could have been the inclusion of a dimension swapping here to avoid certain attacks, or even change how you fight the boss. And what is there just feels boring and better used by other bosses like Benedicta, Sinodo, and Everturno. Really, this boss just goes to show how much a shitty ending can tarnish the whole experience. No amount of lore or build-up can save you from the danger of being a disappointment. Speaking of that thing I was going to get to in a moment, let's keep this short and simple. Like the Warden of a Silent Sorrow from Blasphemous 1, there really isn't a lot here to talk about in terms of the Faceless one. In fact, comparatively speaking, there's even less since the Warden at least had ties to the Brotherhood that the Penitent one belonged to, while the Faceless one, from what I know, has no ties or lore. He's a guy that just shows up to be your introductory boss with only 3 whole actions to his name before he dies. In that sense, he could be argued as a worse tutorial boss. But what if there's a reason for it? What if it is to show off the new, alien world of Custodia the Penitent one finds themselves in? How distant the past is aside from old, ancient relics? Perhaps that is also why he is faceless, a being devoid of familiar identity or personality, only the role of a chisel of oblivion being left, his own identity chiseled away. Or I'm reading too much into a boss that dies at most in a minute and a half. Besides the qualities talked about earlier, one of the things I wanted to examine for this video was how the boss roster measured up to the quality of the first game. After all, it is only natural. The game is a sequel, and so comparisons are gonna be made. But when the game opens up a whole new direction for you with air dashes and double jumps, it's obviously gonna change the way players handle bosses. And this is something I feel Blasphemous 2 does really well as a sequel game. It provides unique experiences for the mechanics that you wouldn't be able to get if they were plopped into one. Bosses like Sonodo, Benedicta, even Sasona wouldn't work or would have to be overhauled if they were placed into one. And even more grounded enemies like Lesmus are expanded upon with weapon swapping and aerial movement if you defeat Avalor early. So when I say that Great Preceptor Radamez is number 11 because he reminds me the most of a Blasphemous 1 boss, please understand. Because by and large, I do mean that comparison in a good way. Radamez, by all accounts, is a well-crafted boss from top to bottom, with lots of extra details put into him. In lore, he was once part of a religious sect of monks as a confessor, tasked with hearing the sins and guilt from everyone to relieve them of their burden. As a result, however, the man grew numb to the experience, unable to cry or feel anything from the numerous testimonies. Over time, this accumulation of guilt led to the gradual erosion of the monastery, with only Radamez left to wander its halls, now defending one of the 3 testimonies of the miracle after it came to him and at long last granted him tears. This influence from the lore carries well into the fight, at first deceiving us with a dried out confessor praying within a glass case, only for the boss to fully reveal itself as a giant skeleton wielding a club made up of dead bodies and covered in glass shards, carrying the confessor body on his back. At first, the boss will be partially submerged in the sand, slowly inching his way forward and using a variety of club swipes, slams, as well as magical projectiles to attack the player. Every now and again, he will project the glass shards in his body, making a beeline for the player. You'll need to carefully time your jump with the ledge on the wall here to jump over him, and make him slam into it. Once he reaches half health, he will fully stand up, and decide to snap into a Slim Jim, a neat cultural nod to the famous painting by Francisco de Goya titled Saturn Devouring His Son. Not the Slim Jim part, mind you. During which, Radamez has a massive buff to damage reduction, and recovers a bit of his health with each bite. In this second phase, Radamez will make use of his hulking body to send out waves of glass that need to be jumped over, cones of glass at a downward angle, and a huge scythe-like shard of glass in the form of a swipe if you are behind him. He will still also carry over attacks like the magic orb volley as well as body charge, which now rains down boulders from the phase transition while he is stuck. Keep your distance, strike decisively, and wear him down until at long last the bag of bones turns to dust. So, why this low? Well, simply put, if this guy was in Blasphemous 1, I would more than willingly put him into the top half of the list because of his overall quality. He definitely feels like a boss that would be right at home in that game given his movement and strategy. This is, however, Blasphemous 2, and when compared to the mechanical depth or enjoyability of the other bosses, I do tend to forget Radamez is even here. Not a slight against him, more so a me thing. Because even still, Radamez does his job really well, balancing things out with the limited moveset you have early on, while still leaving room for options if you grab double jump early to make the fight way easier. He is also the prime example of experimenting with the figurehead system early on, given how he has a major fire weakness, and that you get Veredicto or the Anointed One if you already have Veredicto in Sacred Entombments, as well as the Purified One figurehead from the Costales. Figureheads that massively boost the effectiveness of fire, especially when put together, making Radamez an easy option for players shooting for the hitless boss trophy. With this much good to mention at only the third entry, Radamez shows that things can only get better from here. So Blasphemous 2, as you've already seen and guessed, handles things quite differently compared to its predecessor. And one of the ways this difference manifests is in how customization is handled. Something I may have intentionally forgotten to mention in the intro. How very blasphemous of me. No longer are rosary slots of a defining set building tool you use in the game. Instead, the way you build yourself is through the figureheads, special little statues you can collect and find throughout the world. These come in a variety of effects at base, with bonuses like increasing a certain weapon's damage, allowing you to dodge more frequently, all that good stuff. However, the figureheads show massive potential when combined with another figurehead in the same set, sometimes providing general bonuses, or even special bonuses if you combine it with a specific one. These special bonuses can outright change the properties of your weapons and flasks, and with 4 sets of 2 figureheads to use, you can radically enhance and modify your playstyle to whatever specification you need. Through this system, bosses become even more dynamic in their function, having a set design, but are able to be solved in a number of ways. A series of locked boxes that can essentially work with any key at your disposal. So, with all that out of the way, how about we go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum and talk about the final boss, Man, talk about an upgrade from Escobar and the Last Son of the Miracle. I was really hoping going into this game for the first time that there wouldn't be any fuckery with the final boss, and I was so glad to see that not only was there nothing like that present here, but that it was actually a really competently made fight. While sporting much of the same DNA as Last Son and being a giant, immobile target that shoots out projectiles, the Incarnate Devotion manages to handle it much better given the inherent mobility of the game, as well as the mechanics of the fight. Largely owing to the fact that the heart doesn't fly all over the goddamn arena to whack you. The challenge here comes from the sheer pacing of the fight, because while basic, the attacks come out at such a frequent interval that you will be needing to stay on your toes and moving at all times to avoid the laser pillars and wherever they may spawn, as well as other attacks like the exploding orbs or the rain of daggers from the sky. Occasionally, the Incarnate Devotion will give you a break from all the constant air dashing, erecting a barrier around the central heart and tasking you with destroying 4 flowers that have sprouted in an arrangement that corresponds with the odd points on the halo. The flowers will also stay still, but will regenerate back if you take too long trying to get rid of all of them. Luckily, the orbs created by the flowers can be destroyed by any weapon attack, making it not an annoyance to move around and take care of each. Overall, I just really like the fast pace of the whole fight. Sure, there could arguably be more to it in terms of moves or special phases, but I appreciate just how fluent the whole thing is. Not one of the moments in the fight from the platforms where the floor is lava to the heart shield feels disruptive in the slightest. And more than anything, tasks you, the player, with finding as much uptime as possible amidst the waves of attacks the Incarnate Devotion sends out. Whether it be with time stop, homing poison projectiles, a passive poison lantern, good old Debla of the lights, or whatever else. I also just gotta say, the little character we have on the Incarnate Devotion is really nice, and shows just how flawed and desperate the miracle is in trying to get back its power. It brings up some very apt questions befitting a game of faith, not knowing the purpose any of us are born with, and how that might affect not only a divine Jesus-like being, but the various endings you may get. It may not be the most difficult boss in the world, but the Incarnate Devotion provides one hell of a divine feel to cap off the game. I mean, come on, just listen to that theme! Oh boy. You know, when I said last time I was wondering if the next game would have more of a focus on Chrysanta, I wasn't expecting it like this. Just like, oh hey, there's this weird new guy that's following me around. Oh hey, look, it's Chrysanta. Oh my god, there she is speaking to us! Oh. Clearly the meme of "we have blank at home" became true. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we have Chrysanta at home. And the bitch took the mea culpa hilt right as soon as I got it! Oh, this motherfucker's gonna die tonight. Only for me to promptly be turned into a bitch the moment I got into his boss room. Because Jesus Christ, that damage. While Brother Asterion may move like he's got the biggest dump truck I've ever seen, he puts his body to good use lugging around that behemoth of a sword around like it is nothing, assuming the Chad of Chad walks as he stances up and dares you to attack. To accommodate for this playstyle, Asterion has some of the single heaviest attacks in the whole game, both in terms of impact and damage. And while you think that might allow you to zone him out, you'd be dead wrong. The dude does and will chase you across the screen, whether by controlling space for the wave of fire, thus denying you room, or through his numerous slams and micro dashes to close the gap. Combined with his massive hitboxes and sometimes absurdly fast startup on certain attacks, and it becomes incredibly important to treat this boss like you were dealing with a fucking tyrant from Resident Evil. That is to say, with respect and proper spacing. Else, you might as well stay on the ground from when he first found you. With commitment and respectful social distancing in post-2020 COVID, however, Brother Asterion will go down for the count like any other. Definitely a neat boss, with a fair bit of funny quirks here and there, but interesting that it just kind of ends there. Surely this has no possible implications or repercussions. Whenever there's freedom in boss or level selection, there's naturally going to be some discourse on what is easier or harder for certain people. Experiences, after all, shape how we play, and in a game like this where player power can directly be equated to areas explored, having more under your belt before a supposedly difficult fight can make things a lot easier. So, while there's gonna be some disagreement, and I may not know how popular of a choice this is, I cast my vote of hardest opening boss to Blasphemous, the Incorrupt Sacristan. Oh, Blasphemous. It just never gets any easier with you. Across all 3 playthroughs from base to the one just before writing this, Blasphemous never changed in giving me a rough time. But why is that exactly? Things seem pretty easy enough at a first glance compared to the other 2 bosses. The dude has very readable attack patterns, following the Kirse line of thinking from Blasphemous 1, with flame pillar attack patterns that can be interspaced with delicate steps, while still allowing you to hit him. He also doesn't have a lot of health despite his bulk. So, what's up? Well, simply put, Blasphemous isn't the problem for me at first. It's this little shit. The sleeping Infanta crawls out of Blasphemous' coffin and begins phase 2 by surrounding itself with a miasma thorn shield, requiring players to keep a more delicate distance so they don't suffer contact damage. And that's before the little shit starts firing off the thorns as their main source of damage, with the rate and speed at which they fire seeming to vary wildly between single bursts or all at once. These speeding bullets also have slight tracking properties, being even able to round back around from off-screen. It's a bit annoying, not gonna lie, having to play Fred the Needle, but luckily the Infanta also has incredibly low health. Well, Okay, that was a neat two-phase fight. I don't see what the big deal is.
What's up, fuckers?
So now, take the spacing-heavy focus of Blasphemous, which can chain up to 4 times in a row, by the way, then combine that with the projectile spam from the Infanta that requires you to move in a proper room, and you have the phase where my sanity goes to die. The execution that this phase requires, while possible, is absolutely ridiculous for one of the first bosses you can face in the game. Not to mention, while I like the idea for this free phase boss fight, I think there are some holes in the last phase. If anyone remembers Isadora from my countdown on Blasphemous 1, you'll recall that one of the big complaints I had was that depending on spacing and timing, certain fire orbs would just become impossible to avoid, forcing you to eat that damage, and worse, potentially get knocked into another attack. Blasphemous in Phase 3 kind of suffers from the same deal. If the Infanta decides to just cast a bunch of bullshit while you're stuck with limited space from trying to space out Blasphemous, well, you just can't avoid the bullets and are going to get hit. Even with an early double jump, it can still happen. And with the curving property they have, this can be an incredibly likely result. Not to mention, the damage can be quite insane, particularly the fire orbs from his Beyblade transformation that do constant damage if you so much as touch them a little goofy. I am willing to recognize, however, that this may all be a major skill issue on my part. There are certain bad habits I have. I miscalculate things, or get a bit too eager to hit the boss, causing me to get in these situations. And with the different figureheads and weapons, there are for sure methods to the madness that can make it way easier. Regardless, Blasphemous is up here for a reason. He's still a decent boss that I can enjoy fighting, just with a lot of pain along the way. But hey, isn't that the road of penance? So, turns out, that wasn't the end for Chrysanta at home, because the dude's back for round 2, and clearly he has had enough of being called Chrysanta at home, judging by the ass whooping he gave not just me, but like 90% of the player base. Taking the crown for the hardest boss in the whole game, and maybe even across both Blasphemous installments, Brother Asterion takes everything that was already crazy in his first battle and jacks it up to an insane degree here. Speed? Not a problem, because the dude chains attacks together like it is nobody's business. Reach? Can still just as easily reach halfway across the screen, if not go full screen with the numerous distance closing moves he has and micro dashes. Power? Hits like a brick shithouse, now with added rocket boosters. Tracking, a bitch as always. And those fucking hitboxes? Looks like we found the actual incarnate devotion, because those are the hitboxes of a god! Dude will catch your ass if you even dare try to do the aerial conversion for Mea Culpa or Rudoego's moveset and hit you with that good old counter. All of this on its own makes Brother Asterion a cracked out boss, but the Game Kitchen clearly didn't think he had enough, because they straight up added gasoline to his fire. New moves like the dreaded Spin to Win and Mini Deblas control the entire pace of the fight, putting a stop to the player's antics by forcing them to switch to defense for the duration of the attack. That is, if they don't just get hit by the absurdly fast startup. And with such fast attacks that can be chained together one after the other, combined with the high damage and reach he has, only moves like his sword raise on the ground provide the player the smallest window of opportunity to heal or recuperate. This is, without a doubt, the most brutal fight in the whole game. And I'm not gonna lie, it can honestly be kinda frustrating. Your window of success is so marginally small, but a single mistake can set you back drastically. Made even worse without the alchemical time figurehead combination. The intensity only causes some of his weirder quirks, like his hitboxes or spin to win, to become that much more of a nuisance, ruining the flow because of a single pixel of a hitbox touching you, or alternatively trapping you into a corner, guaranteeing getting hit once more by a Asterion, or just flat out dying. And I had a whole section written down in the early stages talking about a very easy counter exploit to his AI back when the DLC launched. But apparently they just flat out took away the ability to parry him to prevent it. At best, all you can do now is block. Ultimately, the logical side of me wants to argue that he belongs in the bottom 3 due to the various technical quirks and ridiculous degrees of overtuning there are to his movesets. At the same time though, it does kind of make sense for the end boss of a major DLC. And while this could definitely be seen as straight up masochism by me, I do think he is a fun fight when you have a good flow going. It can actually turn out to be a right pacing of high-octane action, mixed with deliberate and careful spacing in consideration to his definable moveset, squeezing out any opportunity you can get to recuperate and claim victory. Plus, while I have been joking this whole time, calling him Chrysanta at home, Asterion is genuinely an interesting character that I would love to see more of. There's a lot of mystery surrounding who he is, what the deal with his master is, and what kind of organization he belongs to, but I refuse to believe that the Game Kitchen doesn't plan on featuring him more in the future. They have all this hidden lore outside the game, so they gotta show off more of him. Right? If there was any boss from my first playthrough that I enjoyed, but was left wanting a little bit more on, it would definitely be Audon of the Confraternity of Salt, who, while had some solid mechanics and gameplay design I could see, didn't really leave the longest lasting impression due to clearing him within a single try and without much difficulty. Like, I got the general idea of his character, a sort of General Nile type of guy from Elden Ring. You know, a big burly man that carries around a large, hefty weapon, has elemental capabilities to some degree, and mainly relies on commanding his army in order to increase the challenge. Huh. Now that I think about it, there really are a lot of similarities. There's even some stylistic choices I like here, such as how when he is calling up the spears from below the ground, you can actually see that they are headless pikemen. And the incorporation of a lore into this badass, stoic, seafaring captain that doesn't even say a single word is awesome. I mean,
death they would not fear, for they had already conquered it once.
It's such a badass line. All for a guy that I beat in a single try. However, this is where things are different, because unlike Sisona, who stayed as a disappointment, Audon was a boss that grew on me over time, even receiving updates after the initial launch to improve his overall AI. And come the Mea Culpa DLC, Audon would prove himself as one of the toughest walls to me in the whole game. The AI renovations in New Game Plus does a lot for Audon's fight, upping his overall damage and speed in accordance with the huge sweeping hitboxes he has, with certain moves like his Soldier Resurrection and Pike Raise still increasing in number as the fight stretches on. The soldiers especially become a much bigger problem on New Game Plus, being resurrected way more frequently compared to his launch version and being overall tankier. This allows Adon to take advantage of his main strong suit, controlling space in the arena through his soldiers, making his ordinary attacks much harder to dodge. Without a good crowd control spell or high damage option, the soldiers can last so damn long on the field, and the longer they last, the higher the risk with the fight dragging on and Adon summoning even more. He'll even swap your focus from killing the soldiers to needing to target him to bring down the shield he raises for his soldiers. Something that becomes increasingly difficult depending on however many soldiers there are on the field, and where they are positioned. Like an old sunken treasure, all these ideas were there from the start with Adon, but only became more apparent and valued when truly examined and cleaned off, becoming an extremely challenging boss that acts as both a knowledge and skill check, demanding you to experiment in order to figure out the best way forward. The waves may be rough and bumpy, but boy won't they make you grow some chest hair by the end. So, while on the subject of bosses that had to grow on me a little bit, I promise that it wasn't 100% intentional that I put the bosses that are in-game chronologically one after the other in the same way on this list. But yeah, Sonodo, Hymn of the Thousand Voices. Safe to say I didn't have a strong impression of this boss at first. And to be honest, a lot of that was just from my trauma of Our Lady of a Charred Visage, and seeing this boss pull some bullet hell shenanigans just like she did. First impressions aren't everything, however, and with time and experience, I really came to appreciate Sonodo for what he does. Because while he does very much follow the trend set by Our Lady, Sonodo walks his own path and spices things up with multiple attack patterns separated by unique phases. Each phase corresponds to a separate head that will take up control of the main body, making it easy to understand what each head does and the attacks you'll be dealing with. Old Man Head deals with billows of fire that can either shoot down or towards the player, as well as miasma clouds that crawl along the ground. These can be simply avoided through weaving between or under them. Then is the Nun Head, which mainly does two things: bursting into a huge pillar of fire that follows you after looking down for a few seconds, and then usually creating a halo aura that must be damaged enough to break, else the boss will recover some HP back. Sometimes she will command the other heads to spew fire vents though. Look for if the head is still looking down for this one so you can stand in the middle and be safe. The Mask Head is where most of the bullet hell comes into play, sending out orbs of light in various arrangements to pelt the penitent one. A good ranged spell or prayer can be used to score some damage while he is in the middle of attacking. That way you can still focus on dodging. Sonodo will cycle between these three heads until he reaches the last 10% of his health, at which point he will commence the last phase with the Wax Head. Players must immediately grab onto the reins made by the Scion's protection ability to avoid the fire below them, subsequently hopping between them to hit the Wax Head, while being on the lookout for the moving fire pillar to dash through. This last phase doesn't last too long, especially if you've been doing good damage. Which is probably for the best, cause I can imagine it getting repetitious if it goes on for a while. Overall, what I like most about Sonodo is the variety included in the fight and how the boss keeps you on your toes. With 4 different heads to look out for, it ensures that the attack pattern doesn't turn stale, and rewards players for being observant and finding the solutions to each phase. Plus the lore of Sonodo and how he ties into the Basilica of Absent Faces from 2 levels prior, while having by far the most eldritch inspiration out of all the bosses, definitely lends him some brownie points. Your Eminence, I rest my case. From what I've seen over the years since this game has come out, this next boss appears to be one of the most well-beloved out of the entire roster. Whether it be for the real-world inspiration, the sound design, or the fight itself, people just can't help but love it. And I liked it too, just wasn't sure if it was to the same degree. Thank goodness for multiple playthroughs though, because while still not as much as other people, I do concur that Aphilor, Sentinel of the Emery, is absolutely top 5 material. Man, talk about a fucking build-up. The whole area before you are exploring the ruins of the old Mother of Mothers church from the first game, wandering through the halls, finding familiar sights, only to end up falling into what I can only describe as the abyss of Custodia. And after an even longer descent, find this dude just randomly chilling in a room and sharpening his collection. What's his deal? While I'm not sure exactly on lore significance, the atmosphere and mood built up through the location pays off magnificently in the boss fight for the first thing you notice: the sound design. It is simultaneously entrancing and horrifying not knowing what the hell you are listening to. This slow, rhythmic melody, made up predominantly of mallets, chimes, and flutes, interwoven with the startling sound effect of a pan flute mid-fights. It just creates such a fitting atmosphere of a Slender Man-looking ass. And it befits his attack pattern as well, an odd, slide-heavy focused moveset compared to many of the other bosses in the game, predominantly twirling his body around at the penitent one like he's a living Beyblade, throwing a series of daggers that ricochet off the walls of the screen, a series of weird circling stomps, and a large slash signified by him sharpening the sword. Multiple times throughout the fight, however, he will break the current sword he has, needing to hop into his collection to find a new one. With each progressive sword, he will add more moves and modifications to his attacks, until the final phase where he brings out his prized golden possession. And my god, the music. It kicks into fucking overdrive here and sounds right at home in a goddamn horror movie. While it's safe to say that all the bosses have a lot of dedication and time put into them, I feel like Aphilor is one of the biggest examples in the whole game. His attacks are simple and well defined, following a baseline that he never strays away from, yet manages to stay engaging the whole time. The phases throughout keep things fresh and challenging, throwing the player more spins to look out for, extra safe zones to find cover in, projectile slashes with the silver and gold sword, and even the phase transition of having to dodge the rain swords. The music and real-world inspiration to afilador de cuchillos, or knife sharpeners, and how they call people to their business with that exact same flute sound effect used in the fight, is an extremely cool detail you wouldn't see in any other game. Even the extreme amount of customization the fight offers, both in builds and approach, is awe-inspiring, having an entire achievement dedicated to reaching him in under 30 minutes from a new save file. And it is possible! You can fight Aphilor earlier than any other boss besides Chisel, and it is still so much fun! In any other countdown, this would probably earn him the #1 slot. But there are 4 more I do like more in my humble opinion. So, hold on tight, people. For as much as I like to talk about difficulty or challenge in bosses, I'll be one to also stick with the other side and say difficulty isn't everything. After all, a gamer boss can be good for more than just their difficulty. And in the case of Ordaspina, Lady Embroiderer, everything is weaved into such a fine tapestry that I just cannot ignore it. As the last of the 3 regret keepers on this list, Ordaspina has a duty to ease the player into the game and, more importantly, the mechanics of Sarmiento and Centella. It may be extremely biased of me to say this, considering she was the first boss I chose in my original playthrough, but I do think she handles this pressure the best. Her movement and fighting style is extremely simple, yet different and effective in execution. Strafing and fencing is the name of the game here, with seemingly mundane moments of waiting for the boss to attack turned into a tense rhythm, each of you measuring the other's steps and figuring out when to attack. She also has other moves to break up the dance, such as judgment cuts that require the player to hide in specific safe spaces, as well as raining down projectiles from above, all while balancing on her golden strings. At 25% health, she will initiate her Desperation attack, splitting off into 2 separate golden clones who fire off different patterns of projectiles, with the last wave somehow always managing to hit me, even though it looks so simple. Me and my brain overcomplicating things. The rest of the fight will continue as normal, the music having built up into a rapid rhythm over the course of the battle alongside her increasingly modified attacks, until with one last decisive strike, the dance draws to a close. Everything about this fight, the movement, the music, the flow of it all being based after Spanish tap dancing, just tickles that little part of my brain that I can't explain. A part that can't exactly describe all that well, but just knows off of feel and vibes alone that, oh yeah, this is the one. And hey, that's gotta count for something. Going into the top 3 here, we are entering the territory of guaranteed greats for me. Bosses that I knew from the moment of fighting, the moment of making this list, that they would score incredibly high. It's incredibly fun for you two, because if you know this game's bosses, you know who we have left. All that's left to ask is, in what order? Well, to give you guys a ghost of a chance, let's show the number 3 entry. Words cannot describe enough how much I love this fight, but words I must type regardless. So, well shit, here I go. On one level, I could talk about how much I find this fight fun with the attack patterns she has, or the music even being one of my favorite tracks in the whole game. But on the other, that wouldn't convey the exact reasons why she is this high up. And it all stems from the level preceding her. Despite its short length, the Basilica of Absent Faces is one of my favorite locations in the whole game. On a visual level, as a ghost tower that appears out of thin air, with possessed portraits missing the faces of bishops past, yeah, it's cool. But also with what the level does in introducing the air dash, as well as the side swapping. This single-handedly creates some of the most fun platforming sections and creative enemy encounters in the whole game, needing to swap sides to the other half of the screen in order to reach places or enemies you weren't able to prior. And somehow, the Game Kitchen managed to include this idea into the fight against Benedicta, and I love it so much! Using the side-swapping gimmick of a level in order to manage the space you have on your tiny-as-hell platforms, as well as to avoid certain attacks, is genius. But it isn't just you who can play around with this gimmick, because Benedicta can also double up on her attacks, by throwing Ciboriums one way at the penitent one, only for the attack to come back around the other. This forces the player to play things patiently, and memorize the height at which she set the flying Ciborium, which is easier said than done when she is flying around you all the while, spawning floating orbs that can luckily be destroyed, throwing out Palpatine lightning bolts, and even sometimes going invisible to throw players off. The caution in trying to score hits on such a tricky opponent while avoiding orbs and Ciboriums on the narrow, altitude-changing platforms you have becomes even trickier when she decides to change platforms into platform. Singular. With only one platform left, now positioned in the middle of a screen, the space you have becomes incredibly limited to deal with her attacks, and jumps that attempt to reach over to one side must be done efficiently, else you will not have enough momentum or height to make it back, resulting in an instant game over. Combine this with how frankly tanky she is, and the fight very quickly warps into a war of attrition, surviving her onslaughts, managing space, making crucial death-defying jumps, and finding openings to attack. It very much falls into the same line of thinking that Ospina does, a flow that manages to without effort click into a little part of my brain and make me instantly fall in love with it. A dance to the death over an infinite, blackened abyss, never seeming to arrive at our destination, always ascending up like we are in purgatory. And once again, can we talk about that music? Absolute cinema. I feel like if there was a rulebook to be made about me and what will instantly grab my attention, near the top of that list most certainly would be the staple rival character trope. Well, So, this is gonna come as a major upset to a lot of people, considering how well loved this boss is. And I mean, for good reason. I was kind of shocked too when writing the script and making the final decision. But let's save all the nitpicky for later, alright? Cause trust me, I want to talk about what is amazing first, and in a fight like this, there is a lot to talk about. First of all, talk about one-upping the competition, huh? Not only does Evaturno, father of the penitents, pull a better Dracula inspiration and fight than Escobar ever did, but he also single-handedly manages to be an even better Chrysanta, the #1 winner from the last list. And the reason why is pretty apparent. Let's start with Phase 1. It's short, simple, and without much bullshit. Evaturno focuses on a set of simplistic magic spells. You've got red lightning walls that need to be dashed through similar to Sisona, a string of red lightning orbs, teleporting and reappearing somewhere else behind his magic cape, and his strongest attack where he takes out the nail in his hand, imbuing his sprite with red aura as he launches a fucking death ball at you. Custodia blows up in 5 minutes? More like Custodia blows up now! This is all important because 1, the fight keeps his health low so as to not wear on for too long and exhaust you for Phase 2. And second, his openings simply require the player to be quick on their feet with positioning and attacking. You can deal good damage to him without any bullshit, and if aggressive enough, can actually down him. This is especially the case for another lightning orb variation he has, where amidst the 4 red orbs he sends out, one of them will be green. This orb can be directly hit by the player with an attack, and if it connects with Evaturno will result in an immediate down. The color also contrasts with the rest of his red-themed attacks, indicating that there is something special about it. But that's not what we're all here for, because that would be Phase 2. Picking up Chrysanta's crimson-binded sword from her body, which, oh my god, chills, Evaturno swaps up his patterns for an extremely aggressive and melee-centric one. Gap-closing lunges with erupting pillars, sweeps that shoot out waves of crimson, sword drags with erupting waves, dash attacks, sweeping slashes, cleaving the air with a sword's energy, converting into an aerial combo from the sweep, and fucking calling in the ghosts of the goddamned arch-confraternities to whoop your ass. Needless to say, it is a hard-as-balls Phase 2. Arguably the hardest fight in the game prior to Brother Asterian's arrival. The two actually have a lot in common here now that I think about it, with Evaturno sharing in the brother's aggression. Minimal moments of downtime or healing in the fight means that the player must be aware of every opportunity they can get out of his moveset, looking out for in particular the sweeping slash, as that's the only move that can be outright parried, giving the player a huge damage opportunity, all the while blocking or dodging through and over every other attack from Evaturno, the variety of which ensures that it doesn't fall into the same repetition that Chrysanta honestly could from the first game. It is a magnificently amazing fight, remixing and redefining several aspects of Chrysanta's fight, literally in the case of Evaturno's battle theme, Padre de los Penitentes, and manages to stand as one of the best Metroidvania bosses I have ever experienced. So why only number 2? Nothing too major in all honesty, just a small nitpick. As much as I love the flow the fight creates and think on a combat level it is better than my number 1, it also doesn't really leave a lot of room for variety or customization. The second phase is extremely parry heavy, and while not to say it is impossible without parrying, I can definitely feel that it was the intended method to approach the fight from the developer's point of view. Which hey, nothing wrong with that, but that does mean other build options, spells, and figureheads just kind of take a backseat. Number 1, on the other hand... Number 1, on the other hand, is just immaculate in terms of the vibes and variety it encourages. I knew it was a possibility going into the DLC that I would be facing some amazing bosses, but I wasn't expecting at all for a boss to reach the same heights as Evaturno while being of a completely different style. Yet Sor Cativa de Silencio, or the Sister as I shall just refer to her from now on, manages to pass with flying colors. The atmosphere is just outstanding, extending into the whole of the Icebound Mausoleum area, traversing this serene, frozen wasteland above ground, and into the dungeon below filled with the echoes of ominous prayer, frozen over torches and statues, and even an execution site with a prisoner. It all makes you wonder what the hell this all is. What kind of cruel experiments or torture happened here? Why is Hilaria trapped in a cell connected to the underground mausoleums? And what is the point of the sisters being here? Are they the audience mentioned in the prisoner's lore, meant to pass judgment on his execution? Or, owing to their Carmelite origin, are they here for prayer and worship to the miracle, taking a vow of silence within their convent, held captive only by their faith to the miracle? The real-world inspirations, as with many things in Blasphemous, are numerous, and it all enriches the sisters' atmosphere to immense levels, as you finally walk into the arena, greeted by the silent stares of the convent. And then the fight starts, translating all of that atmosphere directly into gameplay as that silent intensity becomes manifest through onslaughts of bullet hell, enemy adds, and waves of energy passed via the ground through hand slams. Made even more intense as the fight progresses, resulting in beams of silence emanating from her severed hands, rotational beams from the locket, and the creation of wax crawlers made possible through the opening of the gates in the arena, allowing the other convent members a closer look. Reprieve from this endless onslaught is only possible through continual damage to the locket on her chest, breaking it to get through to the bleeding heart that signifies her mortality. But even that moment of damage is brief, as before long the locket will close back up with a prayer, forcing you to get away and restart the process all over. The fight is a vicious cycle, and with such high natural defenses, HP, as well as mechanics, it makes the sister the biggest example of an endurance fight in the entire game. Without a good setup going in or capitalizing on her openings, the fight can last for more than 5 entire minutes. But what does adversity bring, if not opportunity for growth? For this is where the sister truly shines as my favorite boss in the whole game, and what gives her the edge over Everturno. Using Chain Lightning on Ruego to hit all targets on field, including the adds that spawn in, Mea Culpa o Ruego to block the incoming orbs, Sarmiento and Centella for the naturally high elemental damage, Veredicto for the incredible multi-hitting reach it offers an aerial charge attack, using Bleeding Miracle's boomerang properties to get more hits on the locket as you avoid the bullets, Time Stop for bigger openings, Jabera to the Poison of Jealousy for constant miasma damage at all times, provided it is close enough, Debla of the Lights for huge damage, Abe to the Sleepless Iron for more aggro. All of this and so much more as you try to juggle everything on screen, managing space and looking out for free zones, maintaining rhythm with the rotating beams, knowing that messing up the height, the dash, or misjudging the direction can easily cost you, and cashing in on any damage opportunity all the while to break the locket sooner, making the most out of the precious few seconds you have. It's perfect. It may not beat Everturno in terms of a flow to duel to, but when it comes to that indescribable rush of surviving a boss, of coming up and experimenting with new ways to deal with a problem, of that constant sense of simultaneous movement and awareness, the sister has him beat hands down. And when you combine that with the outstanding atmosphere and incredible music by Carlos Viola, it all makes for a fight that without a doubt earns its spot as my favorite Blasphemous 2 boss, as well as new favorite Blasphemous boss in general. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and on a more serious note, thank you all for your patience and support. When making that Blasphemous 1 countdown, I never would have thought that it would become that well viewed and looked at, considering what my channel was, and arguably still is known for. But through the shared love and hype towards a beloved game, it was made possible. And even if the same thing doesn't happen here, I'm still grateful to everyone. More importantly, I'm grateful to Enrique Cabeza, David Erosa, Carlos Viola, and the whole of the Game Kitchen for making not just one, but 2 amazing games that have managed to sneak their way into my favorite games of all time. The love and dedication poured into these projects from a gameplay, artistic, and cultural perspective is immeasurable, and I cannot thank you enough. The work you make is truly that of the miracle itself, and I look forward to whatever you make next within the Blasphemous universe. With all that sap out of the way, I hope you all have a fantastic day / night wherever you live. Peace and Kulus Vaults.